Can you introduce yourself, Aarika?
Hi, so my name is Simone Rhodes, and I am a passionate elementary school teacher, and I am a huge Andrew Yang supporter. I traveled to the primary states to help him canvass. We were working on a town hall to address issues impacting communities of color right before he's suspended. And now I'm currently working with him about every 5 to 6 weeks to continue to address ways that we can support communities of color, so policies and ideas. So I'm just honored to be a part of this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you. So from your Twitter feed, and from our what we know about you, you've been protesting on a daily basis out in the streets ever since George Floyd's death. So could you tell us a bit about what is it like at the protest scenes, and how is it perhaps different from the way that media and live TV coverage has depicted it as?
Yeah, so when George Floyd died, I thought it was horrific and horrible. And it when I saw it, it just made me think about my dad and how this could have happened to this could easily happen to him. And it just hit me in such a profound way. It made me really emotional. And I was like, we really have to do something. We can't keep just allowing the next person to come and the next person. So I decided to peacefully protest in my community so I can kind of raise awareness. So I go out to an intersection with a group of people every day, and we are holding up signs. We're getting a lot of people honking and supporting us. And at the end, what we do is we kind of light a candle in memory of George Floyd. And it's cool because people are starting to see us there consistently. And something that I do like to go to your question about, is it how it's depicted on in the media? Well, no, because the way that we're doing it, we're not really like marching in the streets and stuff. But it is interesting that every time we show up, police officers do kind of show up. They kind of circulate around the area in which we are peacefully protesting. A part of me wonders oh, is it because there's a Best Buy across the street and they think that we're going to riot or loot or something like that? And only 2 officers actually in the 7 times I've been out there have actually stopped to have a conversation, take photos, and educate us on their position and solutions. And when I talked to them, they actually said that they want body cams. They want, more training, and they just took the time to inform us. I don't think the media shows those kind of conversations. I think that they just zoom in on what's going to get people to watch their news station. And I think it's important to show police officers conversing with the protesters. That's really, really important, because if the goal is to find common ground and the goal is to make sure that we are safe and we're not being harassed by the color of their skin, then those conversations have to be had.
Wow, it's really interesting for us to hear this perspective. Could you tell us a bit about some of those conversations you had? What were the lasting advice that maybe you got from the police officers, and what part of your position isn't being conveyed right now in the mainstream media?
So they were saying basically that they want body cams, but they can't. They want body cams. They think that that's really important, and that police stations should be held to a very high standard across the country. And they kind of took the time to compare and contrast their police station to other ones, and they were saying that there just needs to be a certain level of high expectations, and that their responsibility is to protect every citizen, and that no one should be singled out by the color of their skin. And they felt kind of one police officer kind of gives everyone a bad rap. So they also agree that there should be consequences. Right. So there could be trust within, between police officers and citizens. And because there aren't any consequences, now there's this distrust, right? And we were talking about well, this keeps happening. I was like telling like, as a woman of color, it's hard to continue to see Black men murdered for no reason. There's other ways that we can go about this. And she agreed with me. And then she just kept going back to, that not every police officer is the same. It's a case by case basis. And I was like, but we're not making any progress. She was saying that she doesn't like the idea of defunding. She's like, we already don't have resources. And I think if we defund the police, they also said something about if we defund our police stations and our police officers, that it makes it less safe for people because now they really can't get the training. They can't do the things that we want them to do, is wear body cams and all that kind of stuff. So they were very strong-willed about that. I'm just for like holding bad officers accountable, making sure that if there's report after report that they no longer have the right to serve and protect our communities, right? So what we saw with George Floyd is the officer had multiple complaints. I think most of them had complaints, but they were still out there. And it ended up leading to George Floyd dying, which is unacceptable, right? So we need to show those kind of conversations in the media. We need to talk to our police officers. Jermaine Johnson, are you guys familiar with Jermaine Johnson?
Yes, he won
Are you guys
South
familiar
Carolina.
with him? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, he just won. Congratulations, Jermaine. He actually had a really, really good idea for to minimize, incidents happening between police officers and citizens. He feels, and I agree with him, that police officers should have to live in the communities in which they serve. That way, they kind of have a relationship with people, that they can be able to navigate it when there's an issue in a non-violent way. And it just makes people feel safe. There's a level of trust. And I actually really like that solution. And we talked about that on our channel, the McCoy channel. And I thought I think that's a really cool solution. And then Andrew actually put out some, on his podcast, Yang Speaks, some really thought-provoking, database-driven solutions to end police brutality that are nonviolent.
Right. So we've both read the Medium article that Andrew wrote, and part of the problem is sort of the disproportionate power law enforcement has in some communities in terms of influencing the mayor and not actually having that relationship with the people in the communities. So, and many people have proposed the first step of a solution would be to build those relationships. And so do you think that is something that police officers around the country are all interested in, or would it also be pushback to moving the police officers into those communities?
You cut out for a second. Can you restate that question?
Oh, I was saying that, so right now, many people have proposed the first step is to build a relationship between the community and the police officers. So do you think that is something the police officers you've talked to would be interested in doing this, or will there also be pushback in terms of moving the police officers to live with the communities?
I think that there are some really good cops that are really doing this for the right reason. They went into this profession to protect and serve the community. So I think those officers would be willing to actually live in their communities. And I think that there are some that would not be willing. So I think we have to decide, what does this profession look like? And what, if this is an issue, if we need solutions, then if that's the solution, then I think it needs to be a part of the job description. And if we want to rebuild that trust, I think it's something that they need to really consider, because I also don't think that police officers want to be in the position that they're in either, right? They have loved ones at home. They want to be able to feel safe as well, right? So I think if the objective is to build relationships for the greater good, then I think it should just be part of the job description at this point, because there is a distrust there.
Yeah, you bring up two very good points, Aarika, in that we need to be holding police officers to more accountability and having officers to live within the communities they serve in. And In addition to those two things, what sort of reforms should we institute on a nationwide level to address police brutality in the future?
Yeah, I think that we need to definitely make sure every officer is wearing a body cam and that it's on at all times, and that we are able to access the videos. The public should be able to access those videos, right? I think we're seeing that without having video footage, we don't know what's going on. And someone actually said to me that their fear is that it's going to become a law that you can't record, right? So I think video footage has kind of shed light on how, you know, Black people are being incarcerated and killed at 3 times the rate as any other ethnicity. So I think definitely the body cams is a must. I think that on a national level, we have to have longer and better training. There's the 8 can't wait, all of the different steps of the 8 can't wait. I think all of those should be implemented at a national level to ensure the safety of people. You know, I think we have this problem of racial profiling, and that is a problem. You know, like if someone files a complaint, well, oh, you're Black, it has to be you. Well, that's not the case. So I think that we need to have a better training system in place to make sure that racial profiling is not something that is going to result in these different situations that are obviously leading to the death of innocent people or incarcerating people, at higher rates. You know, we have a mass incarceration problem in this country. And, you know, I think what it's doing is it's kind of creating this culture that's causing people to be so fed up. That's why people are just protesting and they're just fed up. And so I think we need to end mass incarceration. We need to legalize marijuana. We need to make sure that people that are nonviolent drug offenders are no longer incarcerated. We need to fix our bail system. Our whole criminal justice system needs to be updated, revamped, reformed. And I definitely think that police officers should not be able to violently attack anyone. I think that's like the absolute last resort. We saw, my dad made a really good point. He's like, you know, George Floyd was handcuffed. There was 4 of them. You're telling me that 4 officers cannot contain a handcuffed individual? You know, so I think that needs to be on a national level, and there's consequences if you do resort to that. You know, but we have police officers, the police is unionized, so it makes it difficult to pass certain things. But we need to find common ground between our policies and our police unions, that where everyone's satisfied and can feel protected.
And from the tech side of things, from the tech world, there are several innovative solutions to try to address police brutality, in addition to what you've said about body cameras. So there's this app called Citizen, and have you heard of it, Aarika?
I have not.
It's a mobile app that sends users location-based safety alerts in real time, and allows users to read updates about ongoing reports, broadcast live video, and leave comments. So you can have access to a map, and on that map, you can have real-time like body camera footage or footage from just regular citizens about, what's happening in your local neighborhood. And that is something that's come out of the Silicon Valley, a potential way to make police officers more accountable and, crime more accountable. So what did you think of,
what happens if a crime? I was going to ask you, what happens if someone reports it on the app? Like if someone says like, oh, I see something, what happens after that?
So what happens afterward is that it notifies every single person in the area who has the app downloaded that there has been a crime that's been reported.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that app sounds very similar to Neighborhood. It's like a neighborhood app. I think it's those kind of things that are a great idea. I think that we as people have to be invested in our communities and neighborhoods and look after one another. And I think that app, from what it sounds like a really cool way to hold officers accountable and make sure everyone's safe.
Yes. So with George Floyd incident, Ken and I were talking about how there's potentially so many countless cases of similar incidents that just haven't been captured on footage or uploaded or went viral after it got uploaded. So with something like Citizen, it will create a more standard way for people to capture these moments and then potentially at a jury be able to present these evidences and create a system of accountability, like you said, for police officers. Yes. So in addition, my next question is, in addition to this better training and holding like police officers accountable, many around the country have become very cynical of the entire law enforcement system and perhaps like its very purpose and necessity. So you mentioned this idea of just changing the job description of these police officers so they can be integrated into the community. And we heard about like Andrew Yang's idea of like a 912, of giving people option to call for help without bringing a gun to their doors, and then perhaps sending them for treatment and mental health help, and various other ways of addressing these problems. So what do you think about that idea? And do you think it would help address some of the ways you propose, like changing the job description of these officers?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Andrew. I think that, we do have to address mental health. When he did an interview with Reverend Wendy, and they were talking about like this woman, they use this example of a woman who has a nephew or cousin that has autism. And they had to put on the door, like, my nephew is, autistic, he's sensitive to large sounds. I think those are the kind of things that we have to be sensitive to, that not everyone has the capacity to, comply, the first time as a teacher, right? Like I have a classroom of different types of students and I have to differentiate and adjust and teach accordingly. I think that's the same way. So I do like the idea of not having a weapon just when you just come up to the door. I just think it just kind of sets a bad tone, because again, a police officer's job is to protect and to serve, not to kill, right? So, excuse me. So I think finding efficient and safe ways to do that is always the route that we want to go, especially in today's climate.
It's great that you mentioned Reverend Wendy, because we had her on our podcast for episode 3, and she also mentioned that the importance of building relationships with community and police officers, and her experiences of traveling around the world, like in Canada, where there aren't any police officers in sight, right? And there's a whole difference in how policing happens there.
Same with Singapore. When I was in Singapore, it was the same way. Like it's one of the safest places in the world. You didn't see police officers everywhere. Everyone treats each other with kindness and respect, and you feel safe. And it's like not a part of the culture there. I think we have like this culture of like, if you see a police officer, I don't use for me, and it could be because I'm a person of color, but I always get nervous. Even if I'm doing nothing wrong, like I still, for some reason, I tense up, I get anxious, and we shouldn't feel that way. Like you should be able to feel like, oh, I can go to an officer for help and support, and that should be the rapport that you have. And again, I want to really stress this point. I don't think all officers are bad. I think there are a lot of great officers. I think that it's those handfuls of officers that aren't there for the right reasons. They have, some type of, they have a level of racism in them, you know, and prejudice in them, and they don't deserve the honor of protecting and serving the community. So I do think that relational component is essential, you know, because our kids, a lot of times in the classroom, an occupation, a lot of times kids say that they want to do is be a firefighter or a police officer, right? And, you know, there's this prestige around being a police officer. And I think we're at a time now where that's not, I don't know if we are viewing it in that same way. And I would love for that to come back. Like I want kids to think it's cool to be a police officer because they're gonna be helping their community, right? So I think that's another thing we have to, we want kids to not be afraid of officers. You know, firefighters, and I just say, firefighters are very like, when you see a fire, they're always waving, they're friendly. I think that would go a long way if police officers kind of function in that same manner. You know, like they're always like jovial and nice. They come to the classroom. You know, when they see you on the street, they wave at you. I would love for it to be that kind of rapport.
Yeah, and it's wonderful, like the ways we've honored people like the firefighters in 9/11, and in the past also with police officers. But part of the changes that's happening now is many kids are being raised in an environment where they take active shooter drills in their schools from a very young age. And many of the problems like that don't even exist in some of the countries like Singapore, like Canada, like are now happening on a widespread scale. And part of that, like you said, is investing in the community and the relationships between, you know, kids from a young age. So that's like how we want to transition now into education, because that's where kids are being raised, and that's where the foundation of all relationships in life happen. So how was your background?
I was going to say, that you brought up something really, really important. We do have to do those active shooter drills on our campus, and kids, the first time we did it, and it was right after Parkland, they were terrified. They were absolutely terrified. They were just because they thought it was real. And even though we said this is just a drill, you know, it's not good. But one thing when I was growing up that I really appreciated is that we had the DARE program where the police officers came and they came in the classroom and do you guys remember the DARE program, or am I older than you? Did you guys ever have DARE? Drug Abuse Resistance of Education? No?
I personally have not.
I personally haven't.
Okay, well, there used to be this program called DARE, and the officers would come in and they would talk about the importance of doing the right thing and not doing drugs, and that we're here to help you and serve the community. That used to be a thing at my school and in Nevada. And I think something that would be really positive is if officers worked in the schools a little. They came in more, talked to kids and ways to be safe and stuff like that. I think that's a way to build relationships between the officers and the community. But I just wanted to throw out another solution. But go ahead, ask your next question.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. So my next question is, and continuing on that vein, is we're seeing like this massive like funding shortage in both police departments around the country and in schools. So we're seeing like this trend of massive underinvestment in some of these public systems that are so vital to building our communities. So as we transition to talking more about education, how has your background as an elementary school teacher in Las Vegas shaped your view on the education, and how that maybe helps or perpetuates the inequality gap that we're seeing in the country right now?
Right. So I'm from Las Vegas, but I do live in Los Angeles, and you know, funding for schools is based on, you know, housing properties, right? So you see already that if you live in like a low income area, that the resources are slightly different than if you live in like a affluent area. And so resources, they're actually cutting, from what I learned, I just heard a couple of days ago, they're cutting the education fund by I think 8%. I think teachers are losing their jobs and stuff like that, which is completely, it's unacceptable,
Right.
right? Because we need smaller classroom sizes. We need to make sure that we have resources to be able to do our job efficiently. So I think that we are making a horrible, a profound mistake by not investing in our schools. They're already not doing a good job now, right? So we need to make sure that we are investing in our kids so we can, be able to get ready for this huge automation takeover. We need to be teaching tech and STEM and coding and all these different skills that are going to be essential in the next decade. Right? So I'm not for that. I think we need different leadership in the White House. I think that Betsy DeVos is cutting programs that are working. We see that in literacy. So a literacy program that does ensure that kids are reading, she cut. So I think that we need it starts from the top down. And that's a huge problem. And with COVID, what we also saw that kids that were in low performing schools or low income areas, they didn't have the resources needed to be able to transition. So in New York, there was 100,000 kids that did not have internet. They didn't have technology to be able to learn. So what have they been doing since March? So talk about income inequality. Like the achievement gap and that whole inequality piece, it just got wider. It exploded when COVID took place. Because these kids have not been in school at all in any capacity. So I think we have a lot of work that we have to do. And going into the next school year, most schools are doing a blended program, which is like half on campus, half online campus. So then you're still having kids not able to access curriculum. So I feel like we need to be putting more money into education. We need to make sure that every kid has some type of device, internet service, to be able to get something. And it's going to be something that we wish we're going to regret later on if we don't do that, because we see with poverty and people that are ill-educated, it increases crime and drugs and all these different things, right? So we absolutely need to be investing in our kids.
Yes. So on that topic of what's been happening since COVID, now the results of remote learning are coming in, and this NWEA study cites preliminary research indicating that the gains in reading and math standardized test scores when students come back in the fall, it will only be about like 70% and 50% relative to a typical school year. And citing like a possible reason, like you said, as the lack of resource, lack of access to technology, or perhaps like misuse of technology for distractions and gaming. So how has your experience been since March with online learning, and what do we need to do to lessen this inequality gap and provide students a better online learning experience?
I love that you asked this question. I think there's a lot. So my personal experience has been interesting, and I say that because one, it forced me to be more innovative and creative, because in my classroom I do hands-on 99% of the time. Like it's very rare if I ever do like paper pencil. It's not my style. It's not my thing. It doesn't engage kids. So I had to find ways online to get kids to be engaged at the same level that they were in the classroom. So like, I'll give an example. We did Rube Goldberg machines where the kids had to engineer.
I remember that.
I know, it's the best. They had to engineer a Rube Goldberg machine, and the goal was for your machine to either help make your animal's life easier or do something for the environment. And let me tell you, some of my students created the most amazing and elaborate Rube Goldberg machines, and it's stuff that I wouldn't have seen in the classroom necessarily, because they had more time at home to like really invest in them. I mean, I had one kid, he literally was at his computer, he hit print, and then it printed out a piece of paper, and that triggered the whole Rube Goldberg machine. It was like so epic. It was so amazing. And then another one of my kids did a whole pulley system with a race car, and it like went like this, and it had like, it was like so cool, and it ended up watering the plant. So I think I had to use my creativity to transfer that home. And then we did like a lot of cooking projects. But my favorite one is, well, not my favorite, probably like my third favorite one. We read Hamlet. And then it's because normally we do a production of Hamlet or like a Shakespeare play every year. And this year we were doing Hamlet. They actually did a whole animation of the play online.
Wow.
Right. So instead of like acting it out, they did a whole animation. They did the artsy stuff. They did voiceovers. So that was cool because we would never have done that in the classroom. But going into the next school year, I feel like this is a great opportunity to start getting kids to think about technology differently, build apps, build computers. Like those are two projects that I have on my to-do list. Like those, like they're going to make computers, they're going to design an app. We're going to try to do a video game, like things of that nature. So I think that's a way we can approach it. But in the classroom, it'll be like experiments and, you know, like kind of the stuff that I normally do. So I think teachers have to find ways to be innovative, which is great because you have so many, not so many, but there are teachers that are complacent, that just do the same old lecture style. And they're finding like that doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I think it kind of shook up teachers in a way, which I'm grateful for because I think kids deserve the best education. And so going into next year, I would love to see more technology-driven assignments, robotics. Like we can send like kids home with, you know, like kits, and then they could build them, and then they can make, you know, YouTube videos. They can turn it into all kinds of things. So that's one thing. And I think that going into the next school year is a great opportunity to get away from testing because testing doesn't mean anything. You know, Andrew pushes that. He says like, you know, standardized testing is, you know, stressful, it creates anxiety. It's a way to make money, all these different things, right? So I think it's a great thing that we're not focusing on teaching a kid to take a test, but we're teaching kids to become lifelong learners, to actually enjoy education for a change. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm absolutely grateful. Like I know, because I work at an independent school, I've worked at public, but I'm currently at an independent school. And a lot of the tests that you need, the entrance exams, they're like, we're not going to do it next year. And I'm hoping that, like, you know what, we're not going to base a test score on admitting a student, that we're going to base it on their character, their ambition, their work ethic, their passion, how they can elevate the school, not how they did on a Saturday at 9 a.m. Right? The whole child matters. And I'm glad that this kind of happened, and not that I'm happy about COVID, but I'm happy that we're having to look at education differently.
As an opportunity, COVID being an opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it seems like COVID is making this opportunity for an entire new way to educate our next generation, to be like innovators and having a more technologically driven sort of teaching environment. So on that topic, what kinds of upcoming, you know, apps and technologies do you think would help innovate your teaching experience in particular?
What kind of apps do I think would innovate and elevate my teaching experience? That's such a cool question. I would like to see some apps I would like to see more STEM inspired apps. Like maybe if there was like an app, maybe I'm dreaming this up right now, but what if there was like an app where it kind of like you pick like a subject area and it just listed out STEM ideas for the classroom, right? So kind of like a more accessible Pinterest. Does that make sense? So like you can like click math and then like 50 different math inspired STEM activities come up, right? It could be that are like based on the math part. That would be kind of cool. I think another app that I would love is I really am into kids designing video games like Minecraft, like having like a school kind. So maybe if there was like a how-to app, like how to like do video games in the classroom, how to do this in the classroom, like a how-to, like so teachers can just access resources. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, because I'm obviously, like, I never really thought about an app to help teachers, but as I'm thinking about it, I was like, that would be kind of cool. Like, if I want to do, like, a cooking projects in my classroom, I can go to the a teacher how-to app, and then I can just hit cooking and then like lesson plans for cooking in the classroom. Or if I want to do robotics, and those come like how to do robotics in the classroom. I think those would be kind of cool.
Yeah, and most of our audience is like sort of techies who are interested in building some of these tools and platforms.
Will they collaborate with me next year? Will they collaborate with my class next year? Is that something that we could do?
I will keep that in mind, and I'll tell our audience about it.
Yeah, seriously, like if I'll just say this, if there is someone that's in the tech world that would love to collaborate with my students for the 2020-21 mentor, pen pal, mentee type of thing, please reach out to me. I'm dying for that. I was actually going to reach out to Alexis, Serena Williams' husband, who's the president of Reddit.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to ask him if he wants to collaborate with me next school year, because what he did recently was so cool. Like he stepped down so a person of color can take his position. And so he actually liked one of my tweets because I recommended someone for that position. And so I was initially wanting to see if he would be willing to collaborate with me on this idea, because I feel like, how do we give kids the skills that they need for the next, what skills do they need going into the next set of careers, right? And the only way to do that is to acquire the wisdom of people that have done it. Like Reddit is a huge platform. And so I thought it'd be so cool if he would like mentor my students now that he's gonna have extra free time.
Yes. So one of the ideas you mentioned is like perhaps having lesson plans for different topics. Perhaps it will be something maybe like a platform that teachers around the country can share what's worked with them, what hasn't worked for them, and those.
I thought of another one. I thought of another app that would be great once COVID kind of dies down. A field trip app. I think like field trips in your area that like in your state that would be, or city, that would be beneficial. I'm a huge advocate for field trips, especially for kids in low income areas, because they don't get to always get out of their communities. And I think it's a game changer. There's actual studies that show when kids leave their areas and they see different ways of living, it actually inspires them. So a field trip app for teachers would be freaking amazing. Just want to throw one out there.
Yeah, I actually like the idea. It'll be maybe a way to connect schools to people offering maybe discounts for student field trips. What sort of parks are offering those sort of deals?
The guest speaker for classroom app would be really cool. Like you can if let's say there's guest speaker, like people that want to like they know something about marine, oceanography, right? Then like they can like say like, oh, I could do this, and then teachers can look at the app like, oh, this person speaks on the ocean, and then you can bring them in your classroom. Teachers would love that, because we're always wanting guest speakers in the classroom. So that would be another one. Field trips and guest speaker app.
And it'll be way easier than like just cold emailing people, asking them. So like a way to connect those interested guest speakers and schools. So our tech audience, if you're listening and if you want to help out Aarika and some of those ideas she brought up, feel free to reach out to her afterwards. And we can talk further. So next we want to talk about, continuing in this spirit, some of the edtech startups that our people in Silicon Valley might be familiar with, and you might be familiar with. So things like Kahoot, Zigazoo, Quizlet. So we're seeing the potential of many of them taking off in COVID, of being able to improve the online learning experience. So how has your experience with these platforms been? And what sort of features would you recommend on top of them to help better your experience and ideas?
Yeah, so Kahoot is actually funny that you brought that one up. So my students had to do an online presentation, and to open their presentation, they did a Kahoot at the end. So they did their presentation. They're like, you have to pay attention because at the end we're going to do Kahoot. And it actually made the kids pay attention more. If I remember correctly, they did it on the census. We did a whole math unit on the importance of the census, and they were each assigned a congressional district, and they had to break down the data, big charts, and then they did it. I want to say it was on the census, and then they did like a Kahoot game. So I did see that happened. A kid went on their own to do it. But I do think apps are really important for teachers. I love, I don't always use them. I'm gonna be honest. Like I'm not, because I create my own lessons. I do lots of experiments and stuff. So I just tend to go that way. But I do know teachers that like apps. And so I know in our class, at our school, Brain Pop is really popular. Newsella is really popular. I wish there were more engaging reading type of apps for kids. I think that we need to push literacy more. But there aren't any that are like, that get kids even more excited to read. You know, like I wish there were some for, like, I wish we had more cool reading apps. Books just came out with one for little kids where they do like these animated picture books. It's really fun and kids like that one.
Yeah. Yes. So, okay. I think we can also ask something about another idea we prepared beforehand. Yeah, Ken.
Yeah, there have been, really successful test runs of reinforcement learning within the field of AI on online platforms that intelligently orders lessons, topics, questions based on the successes of similar students. And it was shown that it increased educational outcomes by 30%. Do those ideas interest you?
Yes. And where those should be in after school programs. Like, especially, I feel like, after a long day, then a lot of kids stay in aftercare, after school programs because their parents are working or whatnot. And I think that's a great way for the homework help, homework stuff, to be able to go over what the kids learn in the school day. I feel like that's where those should really be implemented, because homework, if you give it, should always reflect what they learned in the school day. So I think that stuff is really great.
Yeah, and continuing that idea of supplementing the school curriculum with things outside of the school. Andrew keeps talking about how I think like a third of childhood outcomes is determined by things that happened in the family before the kids even went to the school, like the number of words read to them after they were born, parental like help, just the atmosphere in the household. And with the African American community, that's sometimes an issue with the systems like mass incarceration and parents not being around their families. Parents not being around their kids. So do you think like the most important thing we should focus about is like you said, reforming this mass incarceration system and allowing this to start in the home before it even comes to the school?
Yes, yes, absolutely. But the problem in the home, when it comes to making sure kids are ready for school, if you're talking about ready for school, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so they don't know what kids need to know, right? Because a lot of parents can't afford, early kindergarten or preschool. It's very expensive, right? So they just do daycare. So they're not set up for those success. Now, in terms of apps, right? To help a parent at home, a great idea for little kids, and I just came to me when you said this, an app for the home that focuses on sight words, a sight word game app for kids. Like sight words are like words that you have to just know based on seeing them, like and, the, if, eyes, then the, like stuff like that, right? That would be like, if parents had something like that at home, then they can help build vocabulary. It would help with reading. Like games that teach phonics would be great to help as they transition into kindergarten. But I also think parents could use this, read to their kid. I think that that's something that is just reading to your kid, nighttime reading, and obviously books of different diversity. But like, I think reading would be helpful. But I do think that parents they're so busy, and a lot of times, at least I've noticed in the last few years, is parents just give their kids devices. Like we have to make sure that kids are playing, using their imagination, blocks, like Legos, stuffed animals, like just make believe. I feel like that's missing in the home. Like yesterday I was visiting my best friend, and I took the kids outside to look for worms. And we were just like looking for worms, and that was what we did. So I think finding other ways to engage kids and to kind of get them excited about things outside of video games is also, and screen stuff is really, really important as well. Because how can you, like, for example, if you're thinking forwardly, right? If you are 4 or 5 years old, right? The most important thing that we can nurture, one of the most important things we can nurture is their imagination, right? So how can you be an inventor or innovative if you don't even have a sense of imagination? And that comes when kids are really, really little and they play. That's an essential part. And I feel like parents that take the time to play with their kids, when they go into the kindergarten classroom or a preschool environment, they are more successful. They're able to read more easily. They're able to compute math. Like there's so many times where I feel like as adults we miss those opportunities, and I feel like child rearing, we can't miss those opportunities, especially with education being as competitive as it is. And we move at faster places. I'm surprised that we're not making it mandatory that kids know calculus in their freshman and sophomore year of high school these days, because it's like we're always like speeding things up, in education. So it's like, I know I'm probably rambling. I just get really excited and passionate.
And this is something that, I looked into as well. So I took this class freshman year called Rhetoric for Education, different modes of education. And I did a research on like the Finnish education system and how they train their teachers to have master's degrees, to give them a lot of flexibility to do research in pedagogy and try out different ideas in the classroom. And sort of just like, as well as how like the government and the nationwide sort of economic and governmental systems allow those ideas to work in the public school system.
Well, public schools also need to give teachers creative freedom, right? Like they want us to be parrots, and that's part of the reason why I kind of moved to a different route in my career, because I wanted to model what an engaging classroom looks like, and you can't necessarily do that in a public school always. Obviously it depends on the school, but it's like teaching to the test, like what I mentioned earlier. And so I think the Finland approach does nurture the professional development and all those kind of things when it comes to education. But also teachers need to be able to lean to their passion and their strengths and get, that's how you get kids into things. Like I love teaching science. I absolutely love it. And because I love teaching it, the kids organically start to love science. I love teaching math, so the kids start to love math. Right? So I think because I'm at a school where they give us resources, they encourage field trips, they encourage all these things, it makes it fun to go to work, and and you can just blossom as an educator. And so I think that the pedagogy, I think that's a part of it, is like let us do our thing.
I mean, and it's something that we feel very strongly about, having went through these systems.
Do you like lecture style? Do you like lecture style learning? Do you feel like you thrive in those environments? Be honest.
No. That's the honest answer.
Why don't you? No, good. Be honest. Why don't you thrive with the lecture style teacher? Why don't you like that?
Because it's very rote memorization. Like the curriculum in some of our classes never changes. And in fact, due to COVID, like one of my classes just recycled lecture videos from last year. And it's the entire same content, and the teacher just gives very sort of generic answers, and it's not very personalized to you.
So it doesn't inspire you?
Of course not.
So it doesn't inspire you. Does it make you want to go to class?
Like we sort of have to satisfy our requirements, but
so you're just going to go. You're not going to learn. And it was Albert Einstein that said the only thing that got in my way of my education is school, right? So I think that's the quote. I might be misquoting, but it was something to that effect, that like we create school to just like get it done, right? Our schools are not designed to inspire, and I feel like that's what it should be. I personally, I get offended when my kids yawn. Did you just yawn? Okay. I have to step my game up because I want them to be rushing to the classroom. I had a group of 8th graders. Middle school is the hardest grade to teach. I don't care what anyone says. Middle school teachers are around are probably like, yes, she said that. It is hard to get them to want to learn, right? Because they're just in a funky place in their development. But these kids would run to class. They were coming in on Sundays because they were inspired to learn. I hate lecture style. It is not for me. I despise it. I absolutely despise it. And so I feel like, I don't know why I brought this up, but it was like, I just feel like school should be a way for kids to dream up ideas, to lean into their passions, to go home like, Mom, I did this today, and they want to continue to work on it at home.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely wonderful that you're voicing this opinion. Like, it'll be great to see all the public school teachers around the country have the same level of passion as you.
But you can't have that kind of passion if you're asked to be a parent, if you're asked to teach to a test. That's why I love that Andrew's platform and is about teaching financial literacy, making real world connections, right? Like, so I don't know if you're familiar, but he has a whole financial literacy policy.
And he has so many ideas of the field trip, like the exchange program.
Yes. Yes.
Lowering voting age so people can talk about politics.
Yes, it's like that's what helps create productive citizens that are going to contribute to society. That's when you feel like, okay, I see why I have to learn that. Because if you don't see why, if you can't make the real world connections, kind of like there's no motivation to learn. Oh, you're going to get $1,000 a month when you turn 18. So let's talk finances. This is how you can invest that money and quadruple it. This is how you can budget. Now there's a reason to be motivated to learn financial literacy, credit scores and all that stuff, because you're getting $1,000 once you turn 18.
I definitely agree that we should have, financial literacy classes, starting from high school or middle school, because I've been a part of the public school system my entire life. And it wasn't until college when I learned how to budget properly. And that was through experience rather than through the classroom.
Did you have to fail before you got it?
Yes, I had to fail plenty of times before I could understand finances, right? And I think we need to start changing the way that our schools, what our schools teach, and implementing more of these innovative programs, like you said, like financial literacy classes, like the American Exchange Program. And I think on that note, a reason why a lot of teachers are being trained to, sort of be parrots and not be creative is because the way we measure teacher performance is based on, standardized test score performances. And we've seen this example of teachers being fired, being very good teachers, simply due to, test scores. And that type of workplace kind of, leads to this type of discrimination. And for you personally, Aarika, what has been your experience on that front? How do you think we should evaluate teacher performance that will encourage them to be more flexible, to try those innovative ideas in the classroom?
This might shock you with my answer. Ask the kids. They're in there with you every day. When I was in college, I don't know if you guys experienced it, at the end of the semester, you had to fill out an evaluation form, and then one person puts it in an envelope and they take it down to the office. That's how to me, that's the most efficient way to evaluate you. Ask the kids, especially I would say from 3rd grade up. That's one way. I think that's how you measure, because I'll tell you, you have people in admin that could not hang in a classroom. Right? They want to tell you how to teach, but they couldn't do it themselves. And I'm speaking straight truth right now. A lot of teachers will always say they can't do it. They want to tell us how to do it, but they can't manage the class. I feel like kids are honest. They will say, I don't like this teacher. I didn't learn, just like you just said a minute ago, Michael, I don't like the lecture style. It didn't work for me. He now has the power to put that on an evaluation form. You know what? I wasn't a big fan of this classroom because it was lecture style. It was new content. I wasn't inspired. That's evaluating the teacher. And then admin says, okay, now style, that you are not inspired, that you're using the same da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Mhm.
How are you going to be better next year? So
Yeah.
let's drop a plan. Like, now, how are we going to, now take that data, that information, how are you going to improve now? And then the next year, okay, then now you have the next year's kids. Oh, we did hands-on, small group. We went on field trips. Now they progressively got that feedback. That's how it, most people were like, that's such a crazy idea. Don't do it. But in my perfect world, ask kids. They know.
And I think it's absolutely wonderful, like this sort of analogy of having the feedback trickle up, from the kids rather than from the higher ups, the bureaucrats. Because right now we're seeing,
They're not in
right,
the classroom. They don't see those moments.
and,
They
and I
don't.
was you're right.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, I get excited. Sorry.
I was just going to, quote a statistic to reinforce what you said, is that many of these higher ups, the bureaucrats of administrators, never taught a day there in their life. And they're making these sort of judgments based on data like standardized test scores, these quantitative metrics that you think are not accurate in actually how the kids are learning and doing the classrooms.
Yes, you have someone like Betsy DeVos who's never worked in a public school making decisions for public school teachers and students. Criminal. Never
Right.
even sat in I actually had gotten into a debate with someone who's never been a teacher, who's never been in a inner cities classroom ever, telling me that hands-on is not the way to go.
It's just ridiculous. Like,
It is.
what is their ethos? What is their right to make those judgments?
It's insane. And I feel like at the end of the day, education is something like how I look at being in the classroom is like, it's an honor and a privilege to be in this classroom. I tell my students that it's an honor and privilege to even be able to educate you. It's an honor and privilege that your parents are entrusting me with your education. So their feedback is the most important feedback, because at the end of the day, I either made their learning experience meaningful and inspiring and beneficial for them, or I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, it's like they're a human, they're a person, what they think absolutely should be the voice that matters the most. And to go back to what you said, like you pop in for 10 minutes a couple times a year, and now you're going to evaluate me. That just seems weird. It just seems like you miss all those great moments. You miss them jumping up and down when they got the egg when they did inertia and they hit the thing and the pan and the egg falls into the water. You miss them dissecting a squid. You didn't see those moments, but you're going to judge me as a teacher. You're going to evaluate. You weren't in there. You didn't see it. Right? So that's my idea for that. Can I just say something about the financial literacy? Back to Andrew. I do want to plug this.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think of the Black community, we have to acknowledge that there's a lack of Black wealth, right? Mm-hmm. And so if students of color, especially inner city kids, right, we're able to get financial literacy in school, think at the UBI, $1,000 a month, now they can generate Black wealth. They can buy a home, they can have a home, they can start a business. Does that make sense? That's another reason why it's important to not only teach financial literacy, but to get universal basic income. And then the other thing I want to say about universal basic income in regards to education, which is something I stress all the time when I was in Crenshaw, we know our public schools are failing. But if parents had universal basic income, they now have a choice. They can send their kid to an independent school, get financial aid, get before and after school childcare, and now the public school has pressure on them to do better because now they're losing funding because they get funded per child. So we need universal basic income because that will help impact education from the back end. I just wanted to plug that because that's really, really important to acknowledge. We need universal basic income.
And I think it's like very Andrew Yang sort of you to see the connection between UBI and education, UBI and these inner cities, and how we can pave ways forward for the African American community. Yeah, and I continue on that topic. I was going to bring up some of the practices that are being used by these big data companies and these algorithms. The way they're keeping African Americans trapped in this sort of debt is they're evaluating people's job capability based on their credit scores, based on their family records, based on their zip codes. And it just creates this system of a very negative loop where if you don't do it right the first time, you're going to be trapped in this cycle of going in and out of jail, not being with your kids, and then the kids grow up without the influence of their parents, and then they don't see like a way forward in their lives, and this just keeps on continuing and continuing. And so for that cycle, what do you think are the steps we need to take in addition to UBI to be able to substitute that with instead like a positive cycle where people are empowered and they have opportunities to move forward with their lives?
So I think that, obviously we've all agree on universal basic income. I think that not that this impacts every Black family, but we do have to end mass incarceration to make sure that there's 2 incomes in a household. That's a game changer, right? So once you're incarcerated, it makes it that much more difficult to be able to get work. Does that make sense? So because now you have a record, and so we have to fix our criminal justice system. I think that we need to, I personally am for something like universal preschool. I think that would decrease the cost of, childcare. And then now parents can put their kid in school. They can start getting the vocabulary and all the skills that they need out the gate at the appropriate age, which is 3 to 4 years. And then now parents are not spending money on daycare. That money could be saved for other things or whatnot. And obviously that helps with making sure that they are in a position to be able to read and write, be literate. I feel like we have to, I liked what Kamala Harris said about, credit scores and stuff, that we have to find multiple ways to measure someone's financial capabilities. Mm-hmm. And she was saying, like, have you paid your rent for X amount of months? Like, that should be used as a way to maybe be able to purchase a home or to purchase a car or something like that. I think having multiple ways to evaluate one's financial background is really, really important. So, I mean, those are just some things in addition to universal basic income. But I do think the biggest thing we could do is make sure that everyone gets $1,000 a month disposable income. And I think voting, I'll add this. I think voting, I think that it's important for people to vote down ballot candidates. I think that makes a huge difference on the legislation that, is passed. I think that more Black people should run for office. I think all ethnicities. I think just everyday working people should be running for office, and we need to vote them in. I think I'm over career politicians. Mm-hmm. I don't think they always have, our interests at heart. We've seen this time and time again. So I think we need to inspire people to vote down ballots, not just during a presidential election year.
And do you think like Andrew Yang being the only person of color on the stage, sort of his background being the minority and facing many of the common issues that Asian Americans and African Americans find themselves in this country, being the minority, what was it about Andrew that really drove you to supporting him?
Okay, so he was by the end, he was the only person of color on the stage. And I thought he did a wonderful job saying how disposable income is something that's needed to prevent something like that from happening, because it takes an extraordinary amount of money to be able to run for office. But what drew me to Andrew Yang is his intelligence. I saw him on The Breakfast Club. You can tell he's genuine, authentic. Mm-hmm. When you actually talk to him, it's like, oh my God, he's so genuine. He's like a regular person. He makes you feel like you're like heard, you're seen. He's respectful, he's kind. I'll tell you something that he did. Okay. I haven't publicly said this, but I'm going to say it on your guys' podcast. So we're in a meeting with him. There's a group of people, African Americans, and we're talking about policies. At the end, it was Ronald's turn. He's in the McCoy group. We do the McCoy channel. His internet was super glitchy, and computer was like, and we're like, Andrew, we're so sorry. We're working on getting him a new computer and better internet, right? Andrew goes, I want you guys to each pick someone to give a micro grant to that you feel is deserving through Humanity Forward. And he actually gave people that we know micro grants to help them out.
Wow.
Right? So these micro grants went out, and just those little micro grants made a difference. Ronald got a computer. We obviously helped him too, but the micro grant went towards that. He, like a friend of mine, who's actually, I had her son in my class, we became friends. She said, Aarika, this couldn't have come at a better time, because she's Black and they live in Crenshaw. Mm-hmm. I had a bill that was just like I was able to pay this bill that was just really adding me a lot of stress, because she just didn't have the money to pay it, and they were calling her, and that micro grant took a burden off of her, and it was just huge. So I kind of digress, but I just wanted to say that's why I like Andrew, is that he is just so thoughtful, caring, and he's running for the right reasons. He genuinely wants to help people, and it's through his actions that we see it time and time again. And you guys know this. Ever since he's suspended, he's the most relevant candidate still out there. He's doing more than Trump is, right? So it's like that alone just speaks volumes to his characters, and it's been an honor to canvass for him, know him, and I will be canvassing for him again in 2024, because we all know that he's running. And so he's just a stand-up guy. And I'm so grateful that you guys support him and you see what an amazing human he is. You should bring him on the podcast. Seriously, you should have him come on and talk to you guys.
That is our final goal, but we're working one step at a time towards that.
Okay, well, let me know when you're ready.
Well, we're actually like ready, but it's been very difficult to contact him, to be honest.
I'll be happy to ask him.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Aarika. I think we're almost about to close up the podcast, but thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate your time with us, giving us really innovative ideas on education, police reform, and the future of tech. Are there any lasting words you want to say to our viewers out there?
Subscribe to your podcast.
Yes, please do.
We have to get these young voices out there. They're super important. Obviously, I care very deeply about police brutality. Please call your elected officials, demand reform, make sure that we get this passed. We need to make sure that no person is murdered for any reason. We need the justice system to work for everyone. So that's another thing. And please, please, please advocate for education. Like, teachers work really, really hard. Kids deserve the best education. Please, please, please get involved in your school board meetings and participate. It's really, really important. And thank you for having me on. This has been, I love talking about education, and this was a great conversation. So thank you.
It's been a great pleasure. And thank you so much. And we'll let you know when the episode comes up.
Thank you. Are you guys, and